Welcome everyone. I'm Julie Maltby and I'm joined here by Baynton. Today we are going to help you assess your own risks as well as learn strategies to prevent or recover from burnout.
So when we're talking about burnout, I think the first question is, what is it? And there's different definitions, but most of them come down to that it's physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion. And there's a few other things that are characteristic of burnout. The one thing I want to say as somebody who has experienced it is it's really slow and insidious coming on, and it's a long time to recover from. So this is the reason why we think it's so important to help people understand it, to see it coming, to know the red flags, and to pull themselves back before they're actually in that place. Some of the themes around burnout are that it's often overachievers. Do you know anybody like that, Julie?
You know I do.
that really don't have good boundaries. They're just working really hard. They don't take care of their physical needs. They don't take care of their emotional needs. They're just very focused on what they're doing. Because of this, because they're physically, emotionally, mentally not having that reserve of energy, when something happens, they'll fold like a house of cards because there's nothing there to prop them up. And when we had a round table of about 36 people who had experienced burnout, one of the things that we found really interesting was that when most people told their story, the straw that broke the camel's back, that moment when they really knew they weren't functioning, was a moment when they felt betrayed or they felt that their integrity was being questioned. So they're working really hard and suddenly they realize somebody doesn't believe they're working hard or somebody doesn't value what they're doing. And then it's like the rug's pulled out from under them. And it's such a long road back after that point. And I could get into the physiological part of burnout, which is a depletion of cortisol. But suffice to say that the physical body takes a long time to recover from that, and so does your emotional state. So there's other things that I want to say just for those of you who are working and wondering about what the particular risk factors are. Those that are listening, just consider how many of these describe you. So it's often people who really expect too much of themselves. And yet they may say, well, no, this is required. I have to do this. But they've never really checked in. And they just feel that they're never good enough, that they have to do more. They may feel that if they don't give 110% all the time, that they're not adequate or that they're incompetent. But it's also that they often are doing and working this hard because it's who they are, but they may also feel unappreciated, that nobody else is recognizing what they do.
That sounds like that could be any of us at any time. So how do we know when it's gone too far?
So we actually have a way of looking at some of those red flags. And what I'd like anybody who's listening to do is, as I go through the red flags, to really think about whether or not that describes you. And if it does, count one for each one. Now, there's only 10 of them, so you can count them on your fingers or your toes. I don't want to judge, whatever works for you. But count them, and at the end, we're going to look at what the different scores mean. So the first one is that your motivation is faded. So everybody has a reason why they're an overachiever, a reason why they're passionate about work. It could be that you're serving the greater good. It could be that you need to always be better than you were last year. It could be that you're very competitive and want to do better than other people. It could be that you think you're making a difference in the world. Whatever that motivation was, now just doesn't seem as important.
So that sounds like that comes from the inside. And so if your motivation is internal, then what's happening that would make it fade? Is that coming from inside or external factors?
Right. So we can attribute either, but the point is that burnout is beginning as this motivation is fading. And you could turn around and attribute your motivation fading because nobody cares and it's not making a difference or whatever. Or it could just be that your energy level's going lower and therefore you're not as motivated. The reason that the motivation is fading in terms of burnout is less important to you in determining if you have burnout than the fact that it is. So one, if your motivation's fading. The next one is that your main emotion is numbness. So not anger or frustration, which could be part of burning out as well, and not really excitement or joy, but just getting through the day, just dragging yourself through the day.
I know a lot of people like that. I've felt like that myself, but I didn't know there was a label for it.
No, and that's I think exactly why, Julie, that people don't see this coming, and all of a sudden we feel blindsided because these things can happen gradually over time, and any one of them we can attribute, as you just said, to an external reason. I feel numb because what's a sense of getting excited, whatever that is. So if your main emotion is numbness, then add another one. The next one is that people drain you. Now, we all know somebody who drains us all the time. And we also know that anybody can be a drain on us at certain times. But what this is talking about is when you don't really want to be around anyone because everybody seems to be draining your energy. So if that's true for you most of the time, then add another one. And the next one here is about irritability. So are you annoyed by things that would have not been a big deal before? You would have let it go, but now, are you having road rage on the way to work? If somebody leaves something on the counter, do you want to scream? But irritability can also be very physical. Are lights too bright? Are sounds too loud? Is your skin very sensitive to touch? All of this is something to do with your central nervous system and can also be a sign that you're headed to burnout.
So this is something that's happening on an ongoing basis then. It's not just a bad day.
Exactly. This is when you're starting to see this more and more, it's starting to become your norm, then that's a red flag. But yeah, any one day, things can irritate you because you didn't have your breakfast, because, you had too much sugar that day. It could be any reason. But when this starts to become daily, then it's a red flag.
Is there a period of time that we should be looking at? So when you say daily, would it be over the course of a week or longer than that before we would know we're at risk?
So they say that if you have these symptoms for 2 weeks or more, that you're 80% more likely to struggle with a mental health issue. So not necessarily burnout, could be depression, could be anxiety, but all these things we're talking about should be red flags. And don't wait 2 weeks. The first day that you feel these things, pull yourself back. Say, what am I dealing with? What do I need to do differently so that this is not my reality? Okay, so next one is you're becoming cynical. So not only are little things annoying you, but you have this sense that, you know what, all people are idiots, or they're all incompetent, or everybody's out to get me. When you're becoming that your whole worldview is negative, is bad, then that's a red flag, and you should check it out. Because, yes, we can actually focus on everything that's negative in the world, but that's very narrow vision. You can also find good people and good things that are happening in the world. It's just where you focused your attention.
So this would feel like a dramatic shift, I think, then. It's not just a question of whether you've always been a person who sees the glass as half empty. This is something that feels very different from the norm.
Exactly. So if your worldview, if the way you were raised was to be cynical, and you're still cynical, that's not a red flag. Yeah, it is a change. Good. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. The next one is your productivity is dropping. And the irony here is that you're probably working longer hours. You're probably putting more effort in. But ultimately, what you're producing is either lower quality or has more mistakes, or it's just is not as much as what you were able to produce before. So your effort may be going up, but your productivity is dropping.
Mm-hmm. And that's something that we can assess on our own, but I imagine it becomes more of a concern if someone else points it out to us.
Well, and you think about what that feels like. You are pouring your heart and soul into your job. You're working long hours, which probably means the people that are in your home aren't very happy with you. It probably means that your health and well-being are suffering, but you're doing as much as you can, as fast as you can, putting as much effort, and then someone says, it's not good enough. Like, it's a tough message to hear at that particular point.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that. And leads me to the next one, which is being physically unwell, getting colds, getting viruses, having headaches, having gastrointestinal problems. But the fact is, we're all going to have some of these things, but is it happening more often? And I've seen people who literally go from one cold to another with only a couple days in between.
If you were to experience some of these symptoms and you went to your doctor, would most doctors recognize that that's a symptom of burnout? Do they ask the right questions, and do you think, or is it up to us to figure this out?
Yeah, I think unfortunately, the reality is when you go to a doctor with a physical symptom, they're trained to treat the physical symptom. And unless you are self-aware enough to tell them about your life and about your work and about your emotional state, they may not pick up on it. Mm-hmm. And so you could go for all the antibiotics that you want and all of the, the cold pills, and still it's not going to help. So I think many more physicians today are aware of looking at the whole person. But sometimes they don't have time for it. So whatever your presenting problem is what they're going to deal with. So yes, we have a responsibility to be aware.
Okay.
So add another one in if that applies to you. The next one is that you're self-medicating. Now, that could be alcohol. It could be cannabis, but it also could be binge watching TV. It could also be overeating or eating junk food, or in my case, eating a lot of chocolate. The thing is the things that we do, it could be gambling. It could be internet porn. It could be anything that you're doing to not have to deal with your feelings, not have to deal with your emotions. And when you're doing that, sometimes we see it as a coping strategy. We justify it as a coping strategy, but in the end, it will actually contribute to and exacerbate any underlying illness. So, yeah.
But you're not saying that if I choose to spend a Saturday watching Netflix, that's a problem, right?
No, I think one Saturday watching Netflix is okay, but
good to know.
Just like for many people, having one glass of wine, that's not a problem with self-medicating. It's when this is when the actual self-medication begins to interfere with your life and your health. Then you know that it's problematic.
Right, because more of a distraction at that point so that we're not dealing with what's in front of us, right, as opposed to just an escape from a bad week.
Exactly. Yeah, thanks. So one more if you do that. The next one is that nothing's really funny anymore, and in fact, you rarely laugh, and when you hear people laughing, that's one of your annoyances. It's like, why are these people like fooling around? We got stuff to do, and you just don't see the humor in anything.
That sounds sad.
It is sad, and yet it's very common when people are burning out that they don't have the energy to see the humor in it, and they're unable to enjoy it.
I can see that would be a real red flag, especially if you're someone who generally enjoys life, because how do we just all of a sudden stop thinking things were funny that we were amused by before? I mean, how do we even get to that point?
Well, and that is exactly the issue here, is that because it's gradual over time, we don't notice it. And in fact, some people don't remember when they used to have humor and enjoy life and have fun and laugh. They don't remember it in the moment. So they don't see the change. They just understand where they're at.
What I'm hearing from you, Marianne, throughout all of these points is that we just need to be really aware.
Right.
Pay attention to what feels different.
Yes. Right. And you can check in too. People who know you really well will say things to you like, you're not yourself. You don't seem to be having fun. You seem really worn out. You seem really agitated. But the thing is there's an article on workplace strategies for mental health on burnout response, and there's a part of it that is the lies we told ourselves. Because again, when we had that roundtable, when we spoke to all these people who had the experience, they told us that they consistently said things like, I'm fine, like what's stressful is you bugging me about this, and really I just need to get this project done, or I just need to meet this quota, I just need to take a day off, I just need to go on vacation and I'll be fine. Mm-hmm. And they're all lies, because you're only going to go back and you're going to do the same thing with the next project or after vacation, and so you just continually. But if you can hear your loved one's concern and not see them as nagging, then you can pull yourself back, right? You don't have to go here. Mm-hmm. So one more to add, if you don't laugh anymore. And then this one's interesting. I mean, sure, there's people who have always had sleep problems. But this, like you've been saying, Julie, it's something different. That you go to bed exhausted, you wake up exhausted, even time off. So you take a whole day off, you sleep in, you never really feel refreshed again. That's a red flag.
And that sounds scary to me, because I come from a long line of bad sleepers, and I'm still a bad sleeper. And it's definitely because I have a lot on my mind when I go to bed, and I will churn and toss and turn and think about what didn't I get done in a day.
And I believe one of the best investments you can make in your health and well-being is to learn what they used to call sleep hygiene, to learn the habits that will allow you to stop. And I mean, it's different for everyone. For me, I can't eat anything 3 hours before I lay down, because just my body churning that stuff, it keeps me up. I can't have screen time. Mm-hmm. If I'm reading a book and I go to sleep, I'm going to do a lot better than if I'm watching television or on my phone or on a computer. But everybody needs to find what works for them. Is it guided meditation? Like, are you listening to something? Is it, some people use stories that are on tape that you're listening to? Whatever it is, it's worth the effort to find it for you.
I remember recently listening to Mel Robbins saying that the worst thing that we can do is to keep our phone by our bed. And yet lots of people do, especially if they use the alarm function on the phone. And it's not only because it's a screen, but of course maybe it's beeping at night, but it's also because it's the very first thing that we'll turn to if we wake up. And then we can get re-engaged or irritated again by what we're seeing.
Well, exactly. So if sleep is your problem, I think you have to try all these different things until you find what works for you. Mm-hmm. I also will keep paper and pen by my bed, so that if I wake up and I'm thinking about something, I write it down. Then I have no fear that whatever it is, I'll forget, but I can let it go and move on. But I have to tell you, sometimes brilliance comes to me in the middle of the night, so that gets written down too.
Right, good.
Yeah. Okay, so one more if it's sleep. So now you're adding up out of 10 what your score is. If you scored 1 to 3, well, that's about normal for most of us. You might need a bit of a rest, but you're probably fine. If you scored 4 to 7, I would say you better start doing something now. This is too close towards burnout to ignore it. And even if you never burn out, some people take years to do it. These things are not good for your mental health, and they're not good for your physical health. So start to look at it. But if you're 8 to 10, you may already be in burnout, and if not, you're really close. So you need to reach out, you need to reset, and you need to find a different way to take care of yourself.
So that leads into my next question then. When we are that close to burnout, then what do we do to prevent it? If we feel like, I'm really close, and is it too late?
So I would say it's not that it's too late, but it's the amount of effort it's going to take, right? That even when you have actually burned out, you can recover. So we've done a lot of work around the evidence about what causes burnout, what causes even post-traumatic stress disorder, and many of these things that disable us or lessen our abilities. And we came up with certain things that the evidence say prevents it. And they're all in this resource called the Plan for Resilience, which is on our website, and it's free for anybody in English and French. But let me just tell you some of the concepts. One is to really improve your self-awareness. You don't know that you're not doing well if you don't really have an awareness of what you're like when you're well. You don't really know whether you're stressed if you're not very aware of the difference between you stressed and you not stressed. So the first thing is to build a level of self-awareness, and that's a lifelong journey. The next one is that when we're blindsided by challenges, by stressors, by disappointments, by conflict, we are less able to deal with them, to bounce back from them, than when we anticipate them. So are we honest with ourselves about the fact that we're going to have challenges in life, that we could have a health issue, that we could have an injury, that we could have a relationship breakup, that we could lose our job? Are we honest with ourselves that that's part of life and that many people have dealt with that and gone on to thrive? The next piece is, what are your coping strategies like now? And what are you doing to develop better coping strategies for future challenges? And that also is a lifelong learning process, to think about how you roll with whatever life gives to you, to not expect it's always going to be rainbows and unicorns, but then also to develop those coping strategies so that you can bounce back from anything. And then another piece that's in this same one is the issue of social connection, and the idea that many people are quite good at saying, can I help? Can I do something for you? I'm here for you. I want to help. But there's fewer people who are good at asking for or accepting help. And resilience only exists when you can do both.
Now, I understand that when it comes to offering and accepting support, it's better if it's specific. Is that what you think too?
Yes, and in the resource, we actually have a list of things that you would ask people. But the way that I say it, Julie, is sometimes I want someone who's going to give me a pat on the back and say, yes, Marianne, it's not you, dear. It's the rest of the world. Of course you're right, because that's just what I need in the moment. Mm-hmm. But more often, I need someone to say, give your head a shake. You're not seeing this clearly. I don't know why you're all upset about this, but let's examine it objectively. Sometimes I just want someone to make me laugh so that I can settle down and not be concerned about whatever it is for a minute. So then I can go back and deal with it. Sometimes I want someone to say, here, let's just have a glass of wine and we'll worry about it tomorrow. If you don't know what you need, then you could reach out to the wrong person. And the other part about this social connection is that if you rely on one person for all of your support needs, it's unfair to them, and they're going to let you down, which means they're going to feel bad about it too.
Sure, because no one person can meet all of our needs. And going back to what you were saying earlier about, if someone says to you, and you said sometimes you just need someone to say, give your head a shake. It's got to be the right person.
Somebody that you trust, somebody whose opinion you value. Yes. But if we wait till we're in crisis, when our cognitive abilities are impaired anyways, when we're stressed out, when we're overwhelmed, we're going to choose the wrong person, or we're going to choose somebody for the wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why thinking about these things in advance can help build your resilience. I just want to talk, though, about the concept of post-traumatic growth, which is more personal, again, than workplace. But post-traumatic growth is a concept that many people haven't even heard of, and yet it's more prevalent than post-traumatic stress disorder. And what it is going through something that's traumatic and coming out the other end either stronger than before, with a broader perspective than before, or with better coping strategies than before. And I bet you know people in your life that have gone through something that seems horrific.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know how they could have dealt with it. And yet they come out the other side and they still love life. They still are grateful for what they have. They still love the people around them. You think about Nelson Mandela, who spent, I think, 27 years in prison, and probably unfairly imprisoned, yet he never lost faith. And when he came out, he wasn't bitter and angry. He was still about how he could contribute to the world. I think about people who lose family members, and it's devastating, and yet they turn their life around to help others. Post-traumatic growth not only is possible, but should be something we seek.
And I've also heard the term benefit finding, and I think that that's very similar, that we look at what we've learned and what we've gained from the experience. But we're not all Nelson Mandela. So it's just the little things that I suppose I should look for. You know, after I've survived a bad experience, if I'm just able to get up, get dressed, and leave the house, that might be the only growth I need for the day.
Yeah, to say, yeah, you go, girl. Look at you. You're not still on your back. You are now moving forward. Way to go.
Mm-hmm.
And to really start to build that again. Now, you don't want to tell somebody in the middle of, or just really fresh out of a traumatic incident, you know, pick yourself up, brush yourself up. We have to feel our feelings. We have to experience loss, sadness, anger, frustration. We got to feel that first. But the whole idea behind post-traumatic growth is then you move forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you were asking, Julie, about what we could do to prevent burnout in the workplace. So I've got a few ideas. One is to go to your boss and say, I really want to understand what your expectations are for my role, how you'll measure success, and what your priorities are, so that you know that what you're doing will be appreciated by the people around you in the way that you think they will. Because if you just keep working really hard, putting your heart and soul into it, but it's not what they want, it's not how they're going to measure you, it's not what they think is most important, then you're setting yourself up to put all that effort in and not get the recognition or the reward that you're looking for. It's also that a lot of people feel like, I have to do this, I can't ask for anything else. But if you put forward, you know, I need help, I need a different piece of equipment, I need different resources in order to get this done, and show them how it would be a benefit, you might be surprised that you've been working this hard without it, and they just say, oh, okay, here it is. But most people don't even ask. They just keep slugging through because they think they have to.
Mm-hmm.
It's also that you could ask for training or even retraining. There's a phenomenon where people have been doing a job for 20 years, so they feel like the expectation is they know everything about that job. But who remembers things from 20 years ago? Most of us don't. And so you may have put bad habits in, or less effective or efficient habits into the way you do your work. And unless you're retrained in it, you could be falling behind. So you're doing extra effort when you don't need to.
Well, and of course things change, and the way that we do our jobs now is so much different than the way we did them 20 years ago.
Yes, but if you think you have to appear like you know, and you don't ask for that help, that retraining, you could miss out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you could also, in terms of recognition, you could also specifically ask your boss to tell you the level of effort that they want, not just the outcomes, but, you know, how many hours are you expecting me to work? And, you know, what should happen when I can't meet a deadline doing those hours? And what is the expectation? And really to ask for recognition of your effort as well as of your outcomes, so that you know that they see what you're putting into it. Working reasonable hours. Now, that's an interesting concept, because I remember talking to a colleague of mine, and she said, I think everybody should only work 35 hours and that's it. And I started to get really anxious, because I don't like working just 35 hours. I like to work more. And if you made me stop at 35 hours, it would increase my stress levels, because I like to go slower when I really need to focus. And then if I have to catch up later, I'll do that. But then I feel in control.
So the key word is reasonable.
Yes.
And it's what's reasonable to you,
Right.
not what's reasonable to someone else.
Yes.
So when it comes to me in my job, what if my supervisor has a different idea of what's reasonable, and they think 50 hours seems fair when I really do only want to work 35 hours?
Well, and I think that's a reasonable conversation to say, the expectation is I work 35 hours, and I just want you to know that I have many other things in my life that are commitments and responsibilities, and I really want to work 35 hours. So tell me how you want me to deal with things when it doesn't fit in there. Help me to prioritize, because if they're paying you for 35 hours, then that's what you should work. One more that you could do to prevent burnout at work is really to have a friend at work. Everybody at work doesn't have to be your friend, but to have a social connection that goes beyond you as a worker to you as a human being can help to keep that balance, because that could be a person that when they say, Julie, I think you're pushing yourself too hard, that maybe you'd have the respect for that person to really hear them. Mm-hmm. And they may know people outside that are friends and family of yours that also could be aware that it seems like you're working yourself into an unhealthy position.
And so now that we're in an unhealthy position, tell me then, what if we're already experiencing burnout? Do you have any suggestions to help us to recover?
Yeah, there's lots of things you can do. And the issue is they take time, but they work. So, of course, there's the usual self-care strategies. Start sleeping well, start to consume food that is good for you, that is nutritious. One of the things is that while you're experiencing burnout, really tough workouts are probably not good for you, but movement, even when you don't feel like it, just going for a walk is. But that really strenuous stuff might actually make you feel worse. So be aware of your body, force it to move, but don't force it past that point.
That's interesting, because I've always thought that if you're feeling particularly stressed, working it out is a way to make you feel less stressed. Mm-hmm. So going and have a really hard workout so that you can kind of shed all of the stress of the day. But in fact, I might make it worse because I'm just pushing myself that much more.
Well, if your stress was only that day, it might work.
Okay.
But when you're burned out and you're stressed every day, then your body is so depleted because of the stress hormones that are in your body that putting more pressure on it can make it worse.
And I think, too, that as we're coming into nicer weather, getting outside and being in nature is always going to make me feel better than being on a treadmill in a gym.
Well, which brings me to the next point, which is to start changing the way that you live and looking at what nurtures your spirit. And being in nature is, the evidence shows, is good for most people. But if being around children raises your spirit, if doing artwork raises your spirit, if going to movies raises your spirit, it doesn't really matter, but it should be that you can feel your energy level rising when you engage in those behaviors, and you should do whatever it is. If it's prayer, if it's singing, if it's dancing, it doesn't matter. But start looking for what brings you joy and book it in your calendar if you need to.
Mm-hmm.
You also have to change the way you think, and especially the way you think about and do your work. You have to start to prioritize quality of work over quantity of work. Not having to do it all, but do what you do really well, because that will help you to have more of a sense of competency when you may have lost that. It's also important that you stop trying to multitask, that you focus on one thing at a time. Now, part of that is because burnout changes your ability to focus. So focusing on one thing at a time is going to be easier for you.
I've actually heard it said that multitasking is a fallacy anyway, that no one can truly multitask, because then we are diverting our attention away from what needs our focus, and we're not able to do anything really well.
Right, and you lose time, right? So people who say they're great at multitasking mean they're great at changing their attention quickly from one thing to another. But at the point of burnout, that skill set is going to be less. So you're right, multitasking is a myth. It's multiple tasks, one after the other. But really, to get well and be well, you need to focus on one thing at a time. And then the last piece of advice that I give, there's lots more on the website, is that you really have to start to bring people into your life that raise your energy. And what that means is the people that drain your energy, that are toxic to you, you need to minimize the amount of interaction you have with them. Whether they're family members or work people, you need to minimize it, do what you need to do, but you need to try to connect with people who raise you up.
Mm-hmm. So it's okay to say that you're not available for dinner with the mother-in-law.
It would be okay if my mother-in-law happens to raise my energy, but for those that's not true, then yes, you can say no at that time.
Are there other resources that can help us prevent burnout at work?
Well, there's a couple more that I'll share. One is Take Your Break, which is a series of activities that do one of three things. They will energize you if you have a very sedentary kind of job that's repetitive and you need that energy. There's some that will help you to calm your mind if you have to think really hard all the time. And there's some that relax the body when you're doing physical work and you're very strained and stressed. And these things are free. You can go and look at them, pick the ones you want. You can subscribe and get them sent to you at no cost. But the idea is that use the time that you're allotted for a break, not to work through, not to sit at your desk, but to do something that's good for your body and mind. Another one that I want to share is a whole book that's built on resilience for teams. So this is something we all do together. And they're mainly conversations that somebody would facilitate with the group that are known to build resilience, known to increase emotional intelligence, self-awareness, but also that help the team to work better together, to support each other better. And these, again, free resources that anybody can use that are available on the site.
So when we're looking at building resilient teams, who would do that? Who would go to the site and pick this up? And I mean, could I do that in my workplace, or do I need to be a people leader?
So I would say that you're going to need permission from your people leader, but what if you went to the site and brought it to them and said, do you think we could try these? These activities are only 15 to 30 minutes. They don't have to be longer than that. So if you're having a team meeting anyways, to include that, I think these are great ways to introduce it. But yeah, you probably need your leader's approval. Take your break, you don't. So moving on, I just want to give the website for the resources that are all available at no cost, and there really are no strings attached. It's workplacestrategiesformentalhealth.com. And yes, I know that's a long URL, but once you get it in there, you just go back to it. And everything that is available there is available in French and English at no cost.
Thank you, Marianne. And thank you to our audience for joining us. We hope the information and resources will help you to avoid burnout. And if you feel that you're burned out already, please use the strategies we shared to find your way back to good mental health. Watch for more free webinars as well as videos, podcasts, and articles in the future. Follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And to be the first to know about resources from Workplace Strategies for Mental Health, sign us up for e-news at the bottom of the homepage. Thank you again for your time, and take care of your mental health.